This video is brought to you by Amber. Amber keeps your EV on the road longer, offering seamless protection with no long-term contracts or upfront costs. Learn more at the link in the description and use code SPEC5 for 5% off. Howdy folks, welcome back to another Out of Spec Renew video, and today we're actually back with the same Model 3 that I worked on here a couple weeks ago where we replaced the PTC heater. In that video I mentioned that there was another alert code present for the 5-way coolant valve. I didn't have the part on hand at the time, but now I've got it here. So we're going to go ahead and get to replacing this thing today. Yeah, there we go. Let's get to it. Alright, so like I mentioned there at the beginning, if you didn't watch the previous video, this car was previously in my shop for some repairs. Like I said, I didn't have the part on hand to fix this particular issue at the time, so I went ahead and got the customer scheduled in to bring it back this time around. And here you can see our alert that's present. So we've got our VC front A210, and basically what that alert means is that the 5-way coolant valve either can't or won't become calibrated. Sometimes they get stuck where they can't actually move, or it's possible that the actual circuit in it that senses the position doesn't actually know what position it's in. More than likely it's probably stuck. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and get that swapped out. So let's go ahead and open the front here. And our first step, as per usual, doing any of this stuff is going to be to disconnect the 12-volt battery and the high voltage system. And yeah, then we'll get all this stuff pulled apart and replace that valve. Shouldn't take too terribly long. Alright, so we've got our low voltage and high voltage systems disconnected. Now we can go ahead and get started on, we'll basically have to prop the super bottle assembly here up. On rear-wheel drive cars, this actuator is actually pretty easy to access, especially from underneath if you put the car on a lift. But on the dual motor cars here, the drive unit is actually in the way. But here, right at the bottom where these two hoses attach, that right there in between them is the actual actuator. And you can't really get to all the fasteners on it very easily unless you actually pick this thing up a little bit to get access. So that's what we're going to do here. First thing I'm going to do is actually remove the 12-volt battery and all of the brackets that attach to it. So there's a couple fasteners here, and then a couple nuts that actually go through the super bottle assembly into the battery bracket. So we'll go ahead and pop all that stuff off. Grab our positive terminal off the battery first. And then I'll go ahead and remove the mount for it. Whoa, losing brackets. Set that stuff aside right here. Then I can pull the actual battery out, which it has this little tube attached to the side that we'll leave in. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we've got that set aside here. Then I'll pull these fasteners out. And we've got the nuts that go here. Okay, so we've got all that stuff. I don't think that I can do much more to remove this bracket because the fasteners are on the bottom side of that. I guess that's just so it's a little bit easier to push back, presumably. Let me double check and see what the service procedure says for this because I don't remember the whole deal here. I feel like this whole bracket had to be removed. I'll be back. Alright, so I confirmed that I do have that right. It is just those two bolts on there that have to come out. Which just seems a little bit strange there that that's the way it would be done, but I suppose that's just the way it is. So, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to pull these fasteners off, which it looks like those are going to be either 14s or 15s. Fifteens it is, so let me grab my other tool for that. Gonna have to get an extension for that one. Or a wobble, I guess. There we go. And then, let's see, we've got a coolant hose clip over here that needs to come off. There we go. So got that pulled out. I think that pretty much does it. Might try and just pull a couple of these wiring harness clips out so that we can get a little bit more slack in some of this stuff. Alrighty, I think now we can move on to the next step. Alrighty, so now what we want to do is we actually want to pick the whole super bottle assembly up a little bit so that we can actually gain access to the bottom. You can do it with a set of just little inflatable airbags. What I've got here is actually sort of an engine brace, crossbar, whatever you want to call it. It just runs all the way across the car on both sides. We'll just adjust these out to where they sit nice and solid on top of the strut towers. So we've got one there. Then we can move this one over. Get that one as well. And then I might actually move that inboard. And I've got a couple of these chains that I'll basically just kind of feed through here. There we go. So we'll just stick one end on that side, one end on this side. Just kind of stick that around so it doesn't move around too much. And then I can start to crank that up. I'm going to adjust this just a little bit. Try and get a tighter grab here so we don't have to wind it up so much. Okay. Do the same over here on this side. I just want to be careful not to put too much upward pressure on it because there are still wiring harnesses and of course coolant hoses and stuff attached to this. Basically what we're trying to do is we're just trying to gain a little bit of access to the bottom here. Okay. I think we're pretty good there for now. Alright, so now comes the fun part of actually removing the actuator. So this is it right here. And actually there's an electrical connector right here that we'll have to unplug. It just has a little tab that pushes down sort of on the front edge here. And then I should be able to just unplug it. There we go. So there's that thing unplugged. Got the connector right there. Now to unscrew it, the screws all go in from the bottom, so I'll show you with my little inspection mirror here. So one is pretty close to where that connector goes, so you can see the screw right there. The other ones are up here closer to the back. So there's one right there. And if I tilt my mirror over, there's the other one right there. So I'll go ahead and get sort of my low profile little ratcheting tool. And those should be, I'm pretty sure they're T20s. So let me go grab the tool and we'll get those screws out. All right, so like I said, I believe these are T20s. They could be T15s though. Dang. I guess I do need a slight extension on my tool here, but this extension might be too long. I think I can get this one out, but the other ones I'm going to have to do a different approach. But that is indeed the right size, T20. Anyway, I'll continue struggling through this. We'll speed through it. I'll come back to you when we're actually taking the actuator off. All right, so we've got our actuator fully disconnected here, so I should be able to just kind of pivot it down and pull it out. And there we go, there's the old actuator. Yeah. We'll go ahead and get our new actuator out here. So there's the new one, there's the old one. You can see they look basically identical. There is they do have to be this kind of four-way spline on here is actually not symmetrical. So it's kind of hard to really see because the difference is pretty slight. But one of these lobes is actually wider than the other three. So it's actually this one on top right here. And on the old one, it looks like it's that one on the left side here. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to rotate the valve in the assembly here to match this position. So I've actually got just a little plastic tool. Sorry about that, I didn't have it right next to me, but I have a little plastic tool right here that that basically fits that spline. I don't remember who it is that designed this, but this is there's a guy that designed this little tool, and you can print it out on I think it's on not GrabCAD, but one of those 3D printer sites. But yeah, so it'll basically just fit right on the splines in here. So I'm going for, and it has a little mark here on the side that we need to grab. I'll actually put it this way since it's easier to put on. But it has a little mark here that tells you where the wide side is. We know when this came out that our wide side is slightly facing down that way, so I'm going to try and fit this into place down here, which is easier said than done because it's kind of a tight fit in here. Where is the spline? There we go. So I got it slotted on there, and we need to rotate it basically 90 degrees. So we're going from here up to here. So basically a 90-degree turn, more or less. So let me try and rotate that around in this direction. Gonna try and remove my tool and make sure I've got it oriented correctly. I don't know that I moved that far enough. Okay, I think we're pretty close there. So let's go ahead and see if we can get this to fit where it needs to go. There we go. So that fit right on there. And then we can go ahead and screw this thing back in. I'll just try and get one screw started here. The main thing is that you just can't really see what you're doing. Actually, before I do that, well, yeah, before I get this thing tightened down on here, one of the things that I should check is I want to make sure that the seal in here isn't deformed, which is kind of a known problem on these. It's not that common, but it can happen. So I'm actually going to take my inspection mirror here and stick it in. I think we're good. I don't see any seal deformation. You guys probably can't see that because of the way the mirror's oriented, but let's see if I can get it to a spot where you guys can see it. There you go. So there's our little spline in there. And the seal is behind that plastic housing. It would be black in color. So if it were deformed and sticking out, you'd be able to see it there. So it looks like we're okay. So go ahead and get the actuator back into place. There we go. Just getting it lined up in there is kind of the tricky part. Okay. Yeah, okay. So I've got one screw started there. Try and get the other ones into place. All right, so we're fully screwed in here. All that we've got to do is reconnect our electrical connection here, just like so. Make sure that's good and secure. Reattach that. Reattach this hose over here. Perhaps if I can get that thing in there. There we go. And let's see. Where did that go? All right, I think that now we can get everything else bolted back on as far as the cross member and stuff. All right, so we can go ahead and lower our strut tower cross brace back down into position here. Okay, we're fully back down. And then we can get our bolts back in here. So we've got these shorter ones up here at the top, which that appears to be our alignment, because that one's a close tolerance hole, this one's a slot, so you want to get these ones in first to make sure that this thing is aligned properly. Then we've got these ones that are kind of a little bit medium length and they have a shorter head. They go towards the outside. And then we've got these extra long ones. They go in these innermost holes here. I'm actually going to try and unhook my chains here so that we can get our crossbar out of the way. All right, then we can get all these fastened back down. Sweet. Get our wiring harnesses reattached. Okay, looks like we're good there. I can get the 12-volt battery back in. We probably could have left that in there, but I think it made it easier to pull that out with it out of the way. Get our bracket back bolted in here. And we got these right here. Boom. Alrighty. Go ahead and get that one connected. Don't want to go too tight on these. We'll leave the negative off for now because we want to reconnect our connector on the PCS, which is sort of our high voltage disable. So let me go do that real quick, although first, let's get our battery bracket back on here. Just because. There we go. That is in. And all right, I just plugged in our connector on the PCS. We can go ahead and reattach our negative terminal there. Contactors closed, good sign. We'll tighten this down too. And what I'll probably do is plug into the car with the laptop with Toolbox and see if I can run the calibration routine for that valve and then make sure we're good to go. All right, so we've got the car booted up here. We do still have the alert. We've got our Toolbox connected. Go ahead and hit connect up here. Sweet. We'll go to actions and I want to go to coolant valve test. Let's try and run that. It's received. I did notice the alert disappeared on the screen there. And look at that, routine completed. So that is a mission success. So no more alert. Our procedure did indeed work. These folks did have an issue between the last time I worked on it and this time where dog mode seemingly stopped working for some reason. I went back through the logs and I couldn't find a reason why it failed. There was a message that was stored that said that it had gone above the temperature threshold, but there wasn't any kind of reason given. I don't know if it was related to this issue. I don't think so, but maybe. The only thing that seemed a little bit weird was that the interior cabin temperature sensor kind of spiked. So maybe there's an issue there that was intermittent or something. I think what I'm going to do is I want to run a thermal system test just to be on the safe side here, and we'll make sure our thermal system performance test. So we'll go ahead and hit run on this. I thought that maybe we'd have to unlock the gateway, but it appears to be working just fine. This will probably take, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, something like that. So I'll let it run through the whole process. We'll come back to it when it finishes. All right, well, that went way quicker than expected. I thought that it would take like 10 or 15 minutes like it does on the old Model S's, but it only took, I don't know, maybe 3 minutes, if even that. But it appears we're all good on our thermal system test there. So all that's left to do is just to reassemble this thing, get the frunk back in, and then this should be good to go, ready to be picked up by the customer, and they can be back on the road again. Alrighty, well, that's it for this one, folks. Pretty quick and simple repair, not too difficult of a job, just really 3 screws to remove that thing, apart from taking the entire frunk apart, of course. But yeah, this is a relatively well-known issue. Sometimes with these failures, you don't really see a huge impact to the car. Sometimes they can have really big impacts, like reduced supercharging speeds. I've even heard of people's drive units supposedly getting basically destroyed from overheating because the coolant valve got stuck in the wrong position. So this is something to keep an eye out for. Usually if it's stuck in a position where it isn't hurting things all that much, you usually won't have like an active alert displayed on the dash. Unless you go into service mode, then you'll see the alert. But if it's more critical, then a lot of the times you'll actually see an alert present even just in the normal user experience. But anyway, yeah, just another quick, simple repair. These folks can be back on the road, and hopefully they don't have any more issues. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching.